Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of MormonStories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is January 29th, 2021, and we are super excited. I am super excited for today's guest. Today's guest is Gregory Barnes, a name that may not be familiar with many of you, but, just wait a few years, 5, maybe 10, he will be as well known to you as Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese. Gregory Barnes is a Mormon filmmaker and artist raised in Oak Park, Illinois. Gregory Barnes studied film at BYU and served a Mormon mission in Argentina. He was raised a faithful Mormon, and he says he was influenced by the comedic absurdity of exiting that Jello-based obsessed desert culture. You're probably wondering, I can hear you asking yourself, why, John, are you interviewing Gregory Barnes? Well, I'll tell you, the answer is not only is Gregory Barnes currently a master's student at TISCH at NYU, New York University, which is notable because it's one of the two epic universities in the United States to study film along with USC. But Gregory, with his colleagues, recently created a short film entitled The Touch of the Master's Hand. They entered it into the Sundance Film Festival and were accepted. The Touch of the Master's Hand is a dark comedy about a Mormon missionary who confesses an unusual pornography addiction to his mission president. The film premieres again this week at Sundance Film Festival. Gregory's work has been featured by National Public Radio, Playboy, which is not necessarily very Mormon, or maybe it is, and Pitchfork. So without any further ado, Gregory Barnes, fellow Cougar, welcome to MormonStories podcast.
Howdy. Thanks for having me on, John, and go Cougs.
Go Cougars, rise and shout. All right, so this is super cool. I have had the pleasure of once being involved in a movie that made the Sundance Film Festival, and it's no small deal. It's an international major accomplishment, and there probably aren't a lot of NYU students each year that get accepted into Sundance Film Festival. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, NYU definitely has a reputation of of prestige film school, if you will. So every year, maybe about 2 or 3 films will be made by NYU students that play there at most. And certainly a lot of NYU alumni play Sundance Film Festival. But this year was especially difficult. Apparently for short films, they received over 10,000 submissions, and there were only 50 short films chosen to play the film festival. And of those 50, only 15 were U.S. Made by U.S. filmmakers. So it is an incredibly competitive film festival, and I'm just stoked to be playing it this year. I'm
so thrilled, and it's fun. It's a really important, interesting movie. We've got a listener. We're live streaming right now, and so we're accepting comments from our viewing audience. Linda Milne says, and he's my cousin's kid. So a shout out from Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, so I think it'd be fun before we start to go ahead and show a little clip that's a setup. Do you mind pasting that Vimeo link one more time into our chat window? Oh, there it is. I see it.
Yep.
Okay. So what I'm going to do now is play a charming little clip that's got a tiny bit of a Napoleon Dynamite vibe. Is that okay to say, or is that insulting?
Fine. No, that's not insulting.
All right. I'm going to play for you now a short little clip that's comedic, and it's a bit of an introduction to Gregory and to this film. So here we go, everybody.
Hello, my name's Gregory Barnes. I'm the writer and director of The Touch of the Master's Hand, premiering in the short film competition at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival. That was great, Greg. You got that. The movie follows a Mormon missionary confessing the humiliating depths of his pornography addiction to his mission president.
What a pathetic and tragic story.
I was raised Mormon. Growing up, the prophet of the church, Gordon B. Hinckley, really went after pornography as an evil invading the home. Having this beloved grandfather figure constantly talk about porn and masturbation was really weird. The majority of the crew was ex-Mormon, and we filmed in a Mormon church my great-grandfather built. Look, there's Ben. He had produced the movie, and Chad, he was our boom op, and Colin, he's in the movie, and Drew too. Chris, he served. Jordan, our editor, was baptized, and Kyle, he did the graphics of the movie. The crew are nice. The crew was really nice to me. Oh, and there's Sam. He really took upon himself the mantle of elder. All in all, this movie was a labor of love as we came together to make sense and air out all that weird-ass Mormon baggage. Hope you like it.
So was that a film you put together for your submission?
Yeah, so Sundance had us put together like a filmmaker intro. So to introduce the film, the themes of the films, and myself as a filmmaker.
That's awesome. Well, that's fun. All right, so let's go ahead and rewind a little bit. If it's all right, let's dig a bit. This is Mormon Stories after all. Let's dig a bit into your Mormon story, and let's carry that through kind of what experiences may have led you. Number one, what was your Mormon experience like? What experiences brought you into filmmaking? What experiences influenced your Mormon experience, led you out of the church, and then also we could talk about whatever background may have inspired this wonderful film.
I was kind of jumping in before the echo about this classic Mormon antidote I grew up getting told all the time. Like I'm sure many Mormons have, of when their parents, their great ancestors were baptized in the church. And so I had the ancestor, Polly Hyde, who I think goes back like 6 generations or however far back it goes, was living up in upstate New York and was actually taught by Joseph Smith fairly early on before Kirtland, his new American religion. And after he finished the spiel, Polly Hyde said to Joseph, if what you said is true, that's marvelous. But if what you said is false, then hell is too good of a place for you. And Joseph Smith rebuked her and said, you're right. If what I said was false, hell would be too good for me, but it is true. And I know it to be. And so with that testimony, Polly got baptized. Her husband was reluctant, but moved to Kirtland, Ohio. And he was eventually baptized after seeing heavenly angels during the dedication as he waited outside because he wasn't allowed inside. And he claimed to see the pillar of fire descend on the Kirtland temple. And he joined, and I had relatives and family that were in the Willie Handcart Company and did the whole pioneer track, Pioneer Ancestors, kind of like the Mayflower of Mormonism. And that was always a very important foundation in my family and a part of our identity. As John mentioned, I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. Did my whole teenage years out there. And
so were those the northeast suburbs?
They're kind of not so much Naperville. I grew up in Oak Park, which is bordered against the Chicago to the east, connected by the green and blue line. If you're used to know any public transit, the L in Chicago. But there are not a lot of Mormons out there. I mean, there was one other Mormon family in my high school, one other Mormon my age in my high school. And we had to drive about 30 minutes every Sunday for church. Did early morning seminary, which was, woke up at 5:30 every morning to attend. And it was definitely a major part of my life and a huge, we weren't close to our Utah family. We weren't close to our family in California. We were the only Barneses out in Chicago. And so, that church was our community. So I really felt safe there. And a lot of, I think, Mormons my age and the millennial demographic, our identities were really entwined with that religion and wanting to do what's right.
How many siblings did you have?
I'm the youngest of 5.
That's a big family.
Yep, big Mormon family.
And what were your parents' professions?
So my mother was a homemaker, and then my father was he actually does IVF. So he's an infertility doctor, and he makes test tube babies.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So how was your Mormon upbringing, traditional versus untraditional?
I mean, I think it was. I mean, when I moved to Brigham Young University, I had major Utah culture shock, but also just Mormon culture shock, where I kind of didn't really I didn't really know what I believed until I was surrounded by a whole state, a campus that believed very specific things that were definitely um, varied from how I was raised. I mean, my perspective in high school is very narrow. I just kind of thought I my friends were Roman Catholic and Protestant, and I kind of hung out with like the good kids, and I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, and they did, but they respected me, and they knew that I believed in God, and we would talk about God all the time, and I really wanted to follow what the For Strength of Youth pamphlet said, which was like to have good friends, and I knew that was possible outside the church. There was no reason to be afraid of anyone. um, so I just kind of took it as another Christian religion. And then when I got to BYU, it was 2008, and so the Prop 8 thing was going on, and Oak Park was like a very liberal city, and the LGBTQ Alliance was a very active club in high school, and so right away, my values of how I was raised were kind of pitted against the values of the church
Because of your progressive community.
because of the progressive community, definitely.
Was your teenage years, just in terms of kind of your interactions with the church, your identity? Is there anything? I mean, obviously, a lot of times, I'm just going to assume that this film touches close to your heart in some way, or you wouldn't have made it. And most of the time, when a Mormon kid is confronted with porn and masturbation, as an example, that hits in their teenage years. So how much of this is biographical, and or how much of this movie did you have experiences with as a Mormon teen or not?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely my first exposure to pornography was at General Conference when Gordon B. Hinckley started talking about it when I was a kid. I had no idea what it was, and had a certain toxic allure to it. And as I got older, I went through sex education in the public school system. My parents gave me the birds and the bees talk, and every twice a year during General Conference, and definitely during priesthood session, someone would talk about pornography, and that kind of hand in hand by association went with masturbation, and it made me feel really guilty, really shameful. And the thing that really kind of was tough was that my father was my bishop when I was a high school student. So
Mm.
while I felt like very much this like just very normal biological urges to masturbate, to look at pornography, I mean, I was just very weighed down in shame because I was occasionally doing it, and did not want to tell my dad, and did not want to tell my bishop. So I was very stressed out and felt very guilty about it as a kid. As far as like the mission specifics, this is a missionary movie. Like by that point, I mean, on my mission, I went full monk, and was very lived by the law in hopes to like have a spiritual experience.
Okay. Did you, whether in your teen years or on your mission, how did this affect your relationship with your heavenly Father? I say that in air quotes a little
Yeah.
bit, but like, did you try and repent? Did you feel like Heavenly Father was judging you, like he was forgiving you? Did you ever feel like you were disappointing Heavenly Father? Like, how did this battle affect your spirituality, your relationship with God, if it did at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the battle definitely did. I mean, I felt like a sinner. I felt like I wasn't repenting, that I needed to repent. I felt like definitely the thoughts of that God was not necessarily that he loved me less, but he was disappointed in me. We know my folks my age grew up with, these silly stories of like that were never really said over the pulpit, but widely spread about how Gordon B. Hinckley said once that, when we all die and go to heaven, there will be a hush when, they know that we lived during when he was prophet or whatever, that we were like a chosen generation close to the coming of Christ. And so I felt like I was blowing it. I was like, oh geez, like I won the lottery of life and I'm blowing it. I'm supposed to be like, one of the people to, to save people or whatever. So, there's, I think Mormonism, whatever it is about that religion, does a good job at, making you feel guilty for yourself and for others. And that was definitely projected. And, it's one of those things now that, in talking with people that are, in the late 20s that grew up Mormon or are still Mormon, there's like a very, I think, comical contrast between like the narrative and the stories that men are told and that women are told in the church as it pertains to sex and gender roles. So sitting down in a group of friends, you hear a lot of stories from the women about how they were told that they had to be mothers, that their worth was tied to bearing children, to being, subjects to their husbands. That's the language used in the temple. It's very, very harmful. And then it's a comical contrast between my friends and I, where we're just like, oh, Gordon B. Hinckley told us not to look at porn, and we did, and we felt really bad. I mean, they told us not to touch ourselves, and it's like so awful, and I don't know what to do now. It's just like a very like disparaging gap. And I thought like, oh, there's humor can kind of adjust this trauma and this gap. And really, these things don't reflect on anyone's relationship with Heavenly Father. If you believe in a omnipotent being, I don't think they really care about this stuff.
Back to your teen years just for a second, when you were trying to decide whether or not to talk to your dad, who was bishop, about this sort of thing, did you confess to your dad? Are you able to say how he was in terms of kind or harsh? I mean, that's just a super awkward position to be in.
Yeah.
How'd your dad kind of deal with that?
I think my dad handled it very well. I mean, maybe all my friends are lying, but I've asked him in some time how my dad was a bishop. Did he ask him these kinds of questions? He never asked me directly if I masturbated, if I looked at pornography. He would just stick to the, are you living to the law of chastity questions. He didn't go into hyper specifics. And that was the same with them. He was a very affectionate, caring bishop. And I was just mostly felt guilty out of, just regular sexual shame, just judging myself for my own actions. But, there was one time I did talk to him, but I was like a half truth. I told him it was just like a wet dream, and I felt really bad. And he told me that I should try praying every night to not have one. If it, disturbed me that much, maybe, every night before I go to bed, I could, in my nightly prayer, ask God that I would not have a wet dream. And I took that very seriously. And I did that for a long time, just like really praying that I wouldn't have a nocturnal emission.
Right. Well, I have a couple comments from our listeners who are taking issue with your generation being the chosen generation. Jordan Baumgardner writes, "No way you get to be the chosen generation. We are the Saturday's Warriors, chosen ones of the 1980s unite, class of 88. I'm class of 87. And I agree. I thought we were the chosen generation." And then Laren writes, class of 2000, we were the legit chosen ones, millennium and all that. So we've got a real problem. We've got imposter syndrome in terms of the chosen generation. Thanks to our listeners for sharing that. Really quickly, Gregory, your profile on your Sundance Film Festival entry mentions that it describes you as a queer filmmaker. So I guess I have to ask, what does that mean? What are you comfortable sharing about what that means? And then as we're talking about you growing up Mormon and, you struggling with porn and masturbation, how does that fit in, if it does at all, or maybe it doesn't?
Yeah. I mean, I identify as bi. It didn't really at the time growing up affect me that much, because I was, very, I mean, clearly I was told a way to be by the church. And so that's how I thought I had to be. And that's where like my focus and energy was. But I think, as I eventually left the church and started to live by my own value systems and explore my sexual identity, I realized that indeed I was attracted to both males and females. And that was and is still a very exciting time and part of my life to be in. And I kind of look at queer identity as an identity that questions straight identity and questions the assumptions and gender norms that our society promotes. So we live in a very puritanical society that Mormonism also runs parallel with and has a lot of shared values with. And um, I think it's important, to question what you've been raised in and what your attraction is. But I didn't. My struggle in and out of the church wasn't necessarily one with, feeling trapped and feeling like I couldn't be my true sexual self. I did feel like I had to behave a certain sexual way, and that denied myself, kind of a dialogue within me that was opened up later. But I wanted to do everything right and follow the law to the T. So I was married during my time of at BYU
Oh,
in the
wait.
temple.
Can I ask a really quick question?
Yeah.
So you did experience what some call same-sex attraction. I know that's a pejorative for many. You did experience that in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
So while you were at BYU in 2008, when Prop 8 hits, I just have to ask, what's that like for you to have experienced same-sex attraction and then to see the church come out so hard against same-sex marriage? Was that
I
hard for
mean,
you or not? Or
yeah, of course. I mean, it was also incredibly confusing. Like I just, in my teenage years, this just wasn't even talked about. And I had friends, that were gay and um, in high school, and it was very odd. It felt like it was out of nowhere. I mean, certainly it was mentioned in the For Strength of Youth pamphlet, so I knew like, oh, okay, well, that's like something, a side of me that I don't have to pay attention to, and that's how I opted into it. But it was very odd for me, mostly. Oddly enough, politically, I just thought, like, what is the church doing politically? Why are they siding on moral issues? Like, they have no place. Why are they donating money? And then I served my mission right after that. It didn't, I wanted to do it all right, like I've mentioned many times. So I left on my mission and then came back, and things were even worse. And it was just kind of a slow downward spiral, where that was definitely very key in my faith crisis, and as well as my decision to leave the church.
were you ever attracted to any missionary companions?
No, I wasn't. I don't think so.
Okay. Anything noteworthy about your mission you want to share before we go on?
Let me think. Well, I served in northern Argentina in the Salta, Argentina mission. And I mean, it was, I really bought into this idea that these were 2 years for Christ and not for me. So it was a really difficult and disassociative moment in my life. Well, certainly it was really unique to be in a different part of the world and get to know the culture and experience so many moments with the people that live there and the friendships that came from that and the language I learned because of it. I'm certainly grateful for. It was also very disorienting, and it kind of felt like, these Catholic pilgrimages you hear about, like walking the trail to Santiago de Compostela in Spain to kind of like get a remissions of sins. I mean, in some twisted way, that's how it felt like. If I worked my ass off in Argentina, then like I'd be good with God. And so as soon as I finished my mission, and I, compartmentalized like crazy, came home and tried to jump back into my life, which no longer existed because I wasn't around. I kind of really relaxed with Mormonism because I realized like, oh yeah, like God, we're good. I did this for him. I kind of bought into my own lie. And I thought, now it's my time to maybe be a progressive Mormon and help, people with similar beliefs feel safe and feel like there's room for alternative thoughts and takes within Mormonism, which obviously proved not true.
So you were having doubts about your testimony as a Mormon missionary?
Um, I
Or
I
no,
wouldn't say that. I
okay.
love no. I mean, I love Jesus, you know, and I really thought Mormonism was a great interpretation of Jesus and his theology. And I love the Book of Mormon and the lessons, and I really did think like it was a moral code. But I also, you know, kind of the doubt was definitely with the leadership. It was, I don't believe these leaders when it comes to gay marriage. You know, Boy K. Packer, I wish I could remember the year, 2010 fall, I think, gave that really aggressive talk about gay marriage, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. But I mean, I just told myself this is temporary, you know, like with blacks in the priesthood, this will change. And, you know, the fundamental principle that Jesus taught of, you know, love thy neighbor and love one another, you know, that will win in the end, which has certainly not been the case.
Hmm. Okay, so you come home, and did you say you got married?
Yeah, so I did the whole, yeah.
Yeah. So how did that happen? Was it right? Right. You know, they do encourage you as a missionary to get married as soon as you get home. How did it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just um I didn't get married super fast, but I definitely got married super fast. It was I met them about a year and 3 months, you know, coming home from my mission. So I'd been home for about a year, and we dated for about a year before we got engaged, and then the engagement was about like 3 months. And, you know, I mean, I was definitely in love with a person, and it felt like a very real relationship, and we had a lot of share perspectives on Mormonism, and we felt like a good match in that way. But um, you know, as our testimonies dissolved and we got older and grew apart, we just kind of realized that we were better off being separated than together. And as I, you know, really I mean, it's complicated, but in that relationship, in that marriage, was certainly helpful in realizing as well that I was bi and wanted to experience different things as well. So it just made sense to uncouple, and we were married for about 4 years, I think. I can't remember.
Okay. No kids?
No kids.
Really quickly, I want to talk about your film career and your film study, which
Yeah.
means we'll go back to BYU, but just talk about the unraveling of your faith really quick. Like, how did you actually, I'm assuming you're no longer an Orthodox believing Mormon, and probably not even a practicing Mormon. So is there anything you want to say about how your faith unraveled? What were the influences, and if that was a hard part of your life at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely consider myself no longer practicing and a believing Mormon. Um, but culturally, I am Mormon. And the unraveling was kind of what I was laying out with how the church handled gay marriage. And then eventually um, when they passed the no long, you know, you can baptize the children of gay couples was another, you know, nail in the coffin. What they did to Sam Young was another nail in the coffin. Um, and certainly with, you know, ordained women, that was going on when I was at BYU. It was just very confusing as someone that, you know, has kind of more of a liberal belief system. I wouldn't even think it's very liberal. I just think people should be treated decently. And it was incredibly hard and difficult because my whole family was Mormon. My whole extended family was Mormon. I had one cousin who came out as gay, and that was I was so happy for them to come out, and it kind of relieved some pressure. But no immediate sibling had left the church. I was the first one, and in my family, you know, my father's a patriarch in the stake, so we're just like very invested as a family, as our family's identity is wrapped up in the Mormon church. So um it was just honestly just very sad to just kind of go this way and watch the church go that way, and you just kind of give up hope um that this religion does promote the values of Christ. And so you just kind of have to cut your losses eventually. And so I did that, and it was very nice being married, having a companion, work together, have the face crisis together. But at the end of the day, both that we just knew we couldn't stay.
Um, so let's talk about the BYU film program, because as much as sometimes we can feel frustrated at the church and or at the BYU Honor Code, BYU's got some top-notch academic programs. Tell us about, and we all know that Jared Hess from Napoleon Dynamite in some way comes out of, I think, the BYU film program. And we know that they do a lot with digital animation and feeding, digital animators into Pixar and other places. I know they've got a great industrial design program. Talk about the film program at BYU and what that was like for you.
Yeah, again, go Cougs. Class of 2013. Oh, excuse me, class of 2014. And I went and studied at the Media Arts Department at Brigham Young University. And Mormons were incredibly industrious people and productive and bright and dedicated. And so I certainly was frustrated that my degree wasn't really a production degree. I wanted to make movies like Jared Hess, like Jerusha Hess. Both of them are great filmmakers. And, I really wanted to go to NYU or USC as a teen, but my parents, said I had to go to BYU, so that's what I did, more or less. But I was still stoked knowing that this screenwriting professor, he taught Jared, so that's like kind of cool. That's kind of like a little medal.
Let me jump in and ask you, what were your biggest movie influences growing up as a kid, as a teen, that kind of like led you to want to be a filmmaker? Were there any?
Yeah, there was this great movie theater in Chicago. It's an art house cinema called Music Box Theater, and my father would take me to see movies there. And he served his mission in Japan, so whenever they would play like an old Japanese classic that he heard of and seen or hadn't seen, we'd go down and see it together. So he took me to see The Seven Samurai once.
Kurosawa
Blew my mind. He showed. We went once and we saw the original Godzilla, which was amazing, blew me over. And then we also saw this movie called Ugetsu, which is a Mizoguchi film, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And that it's kind of this ghost tale, a horror story of a married couple, not really, just spooky, atmospheric, not really like horror, not like a slasher film. And I didn't it was way over my head at the time. I was too young, but these very cinematic, powerful films really just invigorated me. And then, I was a kid that just loved taking out the camcorder and just making movies with friends. So that was, if I was hanging out with friends, we were making movies. So that all kind of like went hand in hand. And then I went to BYU, and then I said, well, I didn't get to go to a real film school, so I'm done with movies. But this class, TMA 105, Intro to Film, fills up a prerequisite. That's awesome. I'll take a film class. It's a general ed. So I took it. The professor was Dean Duncan, and the class blew my mind. We watched some amazing films, like Aguirre, Wrath of God, The Ox. It was really Knights of Cabria was another one of the Fellini film. Really opened up my eyes and my heart. And then there was one more class that he had to take so you could apply to the program. And my friend was applying for the program, and he said, hey, just come and take the class. And, I know you're not applying, but just do it. And I was like, yeah, this will be a fun hang. I'll just make some movies. I'll help with make movies. I'll be just some fluff credits. And so the first day of that class, the professor came up there and asked, how many here are applying for the film program this semester, and literally everyone's hands went up except mine. And I was like, oh God. So I guess I'll apply. I was like, oh, I don't want to be a poser. So I applied, and then we both got in. And so I've always kid that I accidentally majored in film at BYU. It was not intentional, but I got in the program, and I thought like, oh, that'll be good. When I come home from my mission, I can just start seeing what that major's like. And sure enough, I just have always loved movies. It was destined. It's destined to be. But I
just have to say that I think it was called Theater and Film 117 at the time, with Charles Metton it's one of the most important experiences, not just academic experiences, but experiences of my life. Charles Metton was kind of this well-known filmmaker that was a professor at BYU, and we watched On the Waterfront, with Marlon Brando. We watched Citizen Kane, with Orson Welles. We watched, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. Again, Seven Samurai. Like watching those classic films and studying them. It's when I first saw A Man for All Seasons, that again has Orson Welles, but it's about Sir Thomas More. Like that class changed my life, and film has changed my life. And so I just want to say I had to connect with you on that, because I had this formative BYU film experience, and honestly, I would not be doing Mormon Stories today. One of the films they showed, have you ever heard of Frank Capra? Does that name mean anything to you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Frank Capra did It's a Wonderful Life, and he did Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but he also did a film called You Can't Take It With You. And it was in that film, the whole point of that film was, why would you ever spend your life doing what you don't love and what you don't enjoy? And literally, I was haunted by that film for the rest of my life, including my times at Bain and Microsoft, until the point where I left Microsoft and started Mormon Stories. That's when Frank Capra's film stopped haunting me. And so I just have to fist bump and connect with you that film at BYU can change your life. So anyway, sorry, I just had to connect with you on that.
Thanks for connecting. It really did. And not only just the film classes I had and the excellent professorship that was in the media arts program, but also the series they have, International Cinema. I mean, I saw so many. I mean, there were free movies in the Swicket. And I would just go there almost every night. That's where I saw Lawrence of Arabia. Just so many great films, and getting to see them on that big screen, on film prints sometimes. I mean, it was just an amazing campus, and the love for film on that campus is very real and was incredibly formative. And I felt very lucky to go to BYU. I kind of diss it for not giving me a lot of production experience. It's difficult to have production experience. If you want to do that, you're kind of on your own, and that's just, something you have to acknowledge. But there's a lot of emphasis on writing, and then the critical studies side, which is what the degree is really in, is excellent. I mean, the classes I had with Dean Duncan, with Darrell Larson, I mean, saw so many great movies, and that's a huge part of being a filmmaker, is knowing, what's been done, and it kind of opens your eyes to what you can do and accomplish. And so I loved all of those classes, going and leaving. We'd have late night classes where we'd watch 2-3 films a night, and I'd come home at midnight and I'd just be so stoked and so jazzed and couldn't fall asleep because I had just seen a Carl Dreyer film or whatever.
Yeah. I also have to reflect. In the Wilkinson Center, there was a theater called the Varsity Theater. It was right there at the entrance. They had concessions, and they would play movies there, and they would even play R-rated movies, but they would bleep out the swearing and the sex scenes, and sometimes the violence. Was the Varsity Theater still there when you were there, or not?
The Varsity Theater kind of was not as active. They did like a movie or two a semester. It wasn't very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are good memories. All right.
Great memories.
So anything else you want to share about your time at BYU?
No, I mean, it was very interesting. I was lucky enough to do and direct a senior capstone. It was called Shooting Ducks. It was, kind of the first movie I had ever made. So turned out so, but it was very interesting. When you go to BYU, you have to sign like an honor code agreement. Again, you kind of double down and you say, I won't make any movies that depict anything that, goes against the honor code, not specifically the honor code, but the standards of the church, if you will. And so I did make a movie about a friendship that had a lot of gay undertones, and it was met with a lot of scrutiny of like, well, make sure it's very clear that these two guys aren't gay. That wasn't necessarily my intention, but it was just very funny how obsessed they were that I wouldn't even broach the subject. And I kept on telling them, like, it's friendship, they're just friends, it's just friends. But I also was thinking, like, well, who cares? Like, who cares if they're lovers? Like, it just doesn't matter. The audience is just gonna see what they're gonna see. but I had many revisions of the script where they asked, like, shoot this way, or I had a whole discussion with the professor about like how to shoot the film and make sure it doesn't feel like they're connected romantically, and like avoid close-ups here and this and that. And I think it's just hilarious. They're just very I don't know what they're worried about or afraid of, but of something.
They're afraid that people will have sex,
Yeah, I guess that's it.
basically, and they're
Yeah.
afraid of gay sex.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what else would you like to share with us about your education and or career progression leading up to the making of this film? And then we'll just jump into the film itself.
Yeah, I don't think I finished up school. I went down to Los Angeles. I started producing with I had a good friend my freshman year at BYU who transferred, excuse me, my freshman year at Brigham Young University, that transferred to NYU, and he moved out to LA at the same time. And so together with the friends he had made there, I started learning kind of more specifically how to make movies, and kind of lapsed into a producer role. And that was really great, and eventually started producing commercials and music videos, and very briefly worked at a production company with their development arm. But eventually
Any projects any of us would have ever heard of or seen or totally?
maybe, there's like a popular artist 2 years ago named Soccer Mommy. I produced her music video, Cool by Soccer Mommy. Kuko, who's this up and coming young Latinx musician. I produced that music video. That music video was placed on Playboy, which I was pretty stoked about. And I thought that was kind of fun. And did a couple music videos for Steph Chura and Anna Birch, who are Detroit city rockers. So very heavy in the indie film scene. There's Soccer Mommy, directed by Amber Navarro.
I'm hoping this doesn't cause an echo with our listeners, but I'm just showing a little bit of the video.
Yeah, this was a very fun one to do. Shout out to Amber Navarro, the director.
Okay. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, when this may not be interesting or relevant, but like, I'm just trying to imagine a BYU kid going out to LA trying to break into the industry. It sounds almost like a novel. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are the tips to kind of break in when you're just like not just a BYU grad, but like a Mormon kid trying to break into the LA film scene? Is that hard?
Like I said, I was raised in Chicago, so I was so excited to leave the West and go back to a new city. I miss the city so much. I'm more of a city kid, so I was very stoked to be in Los Angeles and felt like I fit right in. I always kind of wore my Mormonism as like this weird badge of honor. I like being, I just thought it's another thing that made me unique and stand out. So I never really felt like that was really like. It did feel like awkward about, how the church presented itself, and like all my own personal beliefs were so different from the church, and those discussions had to be had, but I felt like I could navigate them and just be like, like the church is against gays. I'm not. That's really fucked up. But like, excuse me, that's really messed up. But like, that's not how I am. So.
And what about just like the life of, like you're probably sleeping on someone's couch.
it was a grind. Yeah, it's an absolute grind. You're starting out pay levels, very long days, 12, 13 hours days. You just kind of meet one producer who hires you, and you hope you'll meet another producer that hires you. So I was PAing a lot. I PA'd a lot in Utah for about 2-3 years.
Which means what?
Excuse me, production assistant. It's like the lowest rung on the on the crew, but you get to kind of do a little bit of everything, so it's helpful. You kind of get to see what department you might want to do or be. But I always wanted to direct, and if you ever read any books about Frank Capra talking about directing, or any director, the only advice they have for young filmmakers is, if you want to make movies, if you want to direct movies, you just got to direct movies. So my friend group was very ambitious and active in making short films, and I dedicated a lot of my energy into those projects that played fairly well in many festivals, Slamdance and New Orleans Film Festival, Maryland Film Festival. We've been trying to get into Sundance for the last couple years, and we finally did with my short, which was great.
So what other films did you create that were entered into film festivals? What types of films?
I think the two that come to mind, both are directed by Jordan Michael Blake, who is also raised Mormon, went to BYU with me my freshman year. The first is Two Words, which is kind of about a couple competing on a public access game show from hell, more or less, and it deals with the disappointments of life in general and not winning or winning. And another one we did was called Clean Blood, which was it's basically just a dinner fight over who did what. But one of the main characters is pregnant, and it's the apocalypse. It's pretty peace and love, far out picture we made, but both shorts and both had fairly successful festival reach.
Cool. All right, I'll show a bit of Clean Blood. But you were involved in that?
Yeah, I was the producer on Clean Blood. So we shot that actually out in Utah. Jordan Blake's the actor, so there he is, and he comes home for the holidays, hiding his pregnancy, helps out with the dinner, and gets criticized for not helping out enough, and he kind of just has a total meltdown, and then reconnects with his family. In the end, they make up, and he delivers a baby. So it's like I said, very peace and love, but a fun one to make.
Well, cool. So tell us. Oh my gosh, that's a little bit graphic.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's the end of the world. Did I mention that too? The world is ending. So that's it has a lot. All the bells and whistles.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about what led to. Tell us about the genesis of this movie, of Touch of the Master's Hand.
Yeah, for sure.
And how it started and how it's progressed.
Yeah, so I was making movies in LA. Eventually, I decided I wanted to go back to what I loved about movies, which was writing and directing. So I applied to NYU grad school. I got in. So
now, that's super hard, right? I mean, that's like
a very competitive program. They there's about 30 people in each year.
Yeah, and probably how many people applying?
No, I mean like 5,000-6,000 maybe. I don't know.
Super competitive, yeah.
It's very competitive. So,
what would it have been that put you over? Would it be just your experience, basically?
I think so. I mean, I think both my experience in making movies, although they do take a lot of first time people with no experience at all. I mean, so many of my cohort have backgrounds in psychology and Asian studies, or just, which is a very funny title. I don't know what that means necessarily, but a very, very different backgrounds, not necessarily in film, but I think mine was helpful for them to see that I was a little bit more experienced. Also, I mean, he write like an essay or whatever, personal statement, and mine was about Mormonism, that it is, rarely depicted in a secular way on film, that I was interested in exploring that kind of facet of America in film, and just my background and thoughts about that. So, I got called back. I went to New York, did an interview. I guess they liked me, and they let me in, which was pretty rad.
I have to say, this is just totally random, but my wife's brother attended film school at TISCH as well.
Oh, right on.
He works for ESPN now, but he did the undergraduate there.
Yeah, I mean, very popular program, both the undergrad and the grad, and what sets them kind of apart from USC, NYU is that how production heavy they are. I mean, your first day there, you're like given a camera and told to make movies. So that part, interested me, because I felt like, that's literally what I wanted to be doing more of. And so to have a place that gave me infrastructure to just make and explore my own voice was, I super appreciate it, and I'm very grateful that I went and got in and attended. So going to NYU, they have this thing called the second year film. So in your second year, you make one movie. They give you a camera, some equipment, and some dates that you have the camera. And then you are told to write a 10-page script. and to go for it. So I was given my dates were kind of at the end of the roster in January. So I, maybe I'm just a procrastinator by nature, but I was constantly writing scripts down to the wire. I think the script that became Touch of the Master's Hand was finished in mid-December, at least a large chunk of it, and it wasn't made till the start of January, so we had about 3 weeks and to put it all together. And all of these scripts, I was very interested in exploring Mormonism and depicting Mormonism on the screen. It wasn't until I had a bishop, an old bishop from Los Angeles. I emailed him asking if I could film at the church. I kind of, my thought for the movie was that it would be a simple worthiness interview. So I told him that I wanted to film a dialogue scene in the church, and he said that would be all right. He was down with it. So I certainly kind of, that really gave me the creative momentum to make this movie. Up to that point, I was writing all kinds of just Mormon-ish stories, but knowing that I could film in a real church was so exciting, and I'm so grateful and that he let us film there. And with that, I was always very wary to touch the subject of missionaries. But they're also kind of immediately recognizable as far as Mormons go. So I thought it'd be a very simple story of a worthiness interview where this missionary feels really guilty about a thing, and you go kind of through the worthiness interview, and then there's a little twist where he wants to confess about his pornography addiction, but it turns out he kind of has a pornography addiction. He thinks he's addicted to something that's pornography that's not quite porn. So that was the punchline that came up very early on, and the rest of the script kind of wrote itself.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Utah State University getting my training as a psychologist, there was this idea of bubble porn. Have you heard of bubble porn?
No, what's bubble porn?
It sounds kind of fun or interesting. It's not necessarily what they do. And if you guys want to Google this, you can. But basically, they take an original photo. This has relevance, I promise. But BYU students would take an original photo of a girl in a bathing suit. Okay, so the original photo is of a girl in a bathing suit, but then they cut out all the parts of the bathing suit that of the bathing suit so that it looks like a naked woman, except for the parts that are missing, which the original thing was a bathing suit, not skin. But then if they look at that while they masturbate, they're not looking at porn because the original photo had cloth and all the body parts covered, but because the swimsuit parts are cut out in these circles, your mind thinks of it, conceives of the photo as being pornography when it actually isn't. And anyway, my whole point is that I remember working with clients that would watch a YouTube video of a woman in a dress, but because she was kind of acting in a way that was a little bit sexual, in their minds, anything that aroused the passions, which is basically just any woman in the case of heterosexual men, they would think of it as porn, even though it wasn't anything near what you or I might think of porn. Is that kind of what you're getting at, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's this thought that pornography is any media that arouses a sexual feeling, and it's on you to kind of, I think, accurately police, be your own censor and avoid those feelings, which, I don't think that's really the definition of pornography. And it also kind of sets you up to have a mindset that objectifies everything. And it's also, I think, like a very simple toddler mentality. If you tell someone not to touch it or not to look at the thing, they're going to go nuts, and that's going to be their focus. So, I also was interested in the worthiness interview in general, in Mormonism as a way to kind of censor and control people. Oh, there's bubble porn.
So for those who are watching us, So on the left is the photo of the girls in bikinis. And then on the right is how it ends up looking pornographic with the bubble porn. I just had to show that just to kind of give people.
Thank you, John. That's great. I love that so much. You have no idea.
Maybe that's your next.
Oh yeah, I'm making a note.
And there's guy bubble porn too. Okay, so without any further ado, where were you?
Yeah, so that was my approach to the story, or the story I wanted to tell. I mean, just I really am interested in this thought or the challenge. I view it maybe more like that of telling Mormon stories in film, because there's so much to cover. There's so much cultural detail that I think is very rich, and it's also very unfamiliar with people to people. So there's a lot of ground to cover, and I just thought the simplest way to do it is to just pick a character that has a very familiar emotional arc, someone we can emotionally connect to, someone that feels like an addict, has convinced themselves that they are an addict, like a drug addict. And that's where all the humor comes from, is this kind of false thought he's carrying, and this culture he just is longing. I think we all kind of have this desire to belong somewhere, to a group of people, and he just wants to do it right. And I was very interested in creating a movie that kind of had a Mormon feel to it. So certainly those VHSs growing up that I watched every Sunday, because I couldn't watch normal regular movies on Sunday, influenced that. Movies like Godly Sorrow that has, stars Aaron Eckhart, and all kinds of stuff really informed kind of my visual approach to the film as well.
Let's go ahead, if it's okay, and show the 1-minute clip from your short. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, yeah. So this clip, we have the main character, Elder Hyde, who is meeting with his mission president, Presidente Packard, and they're serving in Mexico, so the whole thing's in Spanish, and he has just finished his first round of worthiness questions, and he lied through it. He's about to leave the room, and he's decided that no, indeed, he's going to confess and tell the truth about his addiction.
All right. So here is the scene from The Touch of the Master's Hand, directed by Gregory Barnes.
Presidente, I'm having a hard time with
Por favor, Elder, en la lengua de su misión.
Yo tengo un problema de masturbación.
Masturbación.
Sí, me masturbo.
¿Cuántas veces la semana se masturba?
4 más o menos.
¿Dónde se masturba?
En el baño, mayormente.
Está masturbando en el cuarto de compañerismo.
Nunca. En el baño solamente.
¿Por cuánto tiempo ha luchado con el abuso personal?
Mi vida entera.
Está mirando pornografía.
All right. So I guess we didn't warn our listeners that that whole thing was actually in Spanish, did we?
No, I forgot to mention.
So why don't you tell our listeners what that dialogue was?
Yeah, so the movie takes place during a zone conference, which is like a bi-monthly meeting missionaries have, where they come together, they hear from the mission president, and they kind of get coached. They do team building exercises. And so we follow Elder Hyde as he navigates this, as he's carrying this guilt. And every zone conference kind of was topped off by delightful worthiness interviews with the mission president, where he would ask you, what's what. My mission president had a a certain speed. He'd kind of like in out attitude, so you knew if like a kid was in there for like a while that like, something was up. And so the movie takes place on his Mormon mission, which is in Mexico. So their mission president's a little strict and believes that you should speak always in the language that you've been called to serve in, because that's the language God wants you to speak. So a little extra orthodox, a little extra zealous, and so I'm sure that kind of adds to the fear Elder hides feeling.
And what actually is said during that scene? What can you share with us?
Oh, I mean, there were subtitles on the bottom. I hope people were able to read them.
But for our listening audience,
listening audience.
yeah.
Oh my. I mean, he basically comes in and says, "President, there's something else." And he sits down, awkwardly sits, and he starts in English saying, "I have a master." And the president cuts him off and says, "Please, elder, in the language of your mission." And then in Spanish, she tells him, "Yo tengo un problema de masturbación," which is, "I have a problem of masturbation." Then the president says, "Masturbación," and he says, "Yes, I masturbate." And then he asks him, how many times a day does he masturbate? What time in the day does he masturbate? Where does he masturbate? Maybe I said that. And then he asks him if he masturbates in his room with his companion there. And, he says no to all of this. Well, he says, I masturbate 4 or 5 times a day. I masturbate mostly in the bathroom. No, I don't masturbate with my companion in the same room. And then it ends with the president asking if he looks at pornography. And that's where we cut off.
All right. What made you decide to do a short versus kind of a feature length?
Oh, I would love to do a feature. I mean, this was kind of like a homework assignment for school, was to make a 10-page script. So that's what I did and wanted to execute precisely. I'm very excited and making a first feature, which I hope to do the next year or so. And one that, continues from a personal place, a personal story about Mormonism. I love the culture. I think it's really important to tell these Mormon stories.
Sure.
Simply because they're just not really addressed, and I think reflects on a broader scale, similar themes in our country.
So I'm curious, when your professors at NYU see this script and there's so many things that a film student could make a film about.
Yeah.
I know that sometimes in the professional world, even in the field of psychology, it's like, stay away from religion. Religion's dangerous. Religion's scary. You can wreck your career. You can get typecast. Like it's controversial. People, you don't want to get typecast. You don't want to offend potential donors. Like, there are all sorts of reasons why in the professional world, people stay away from talking about religious stuff, let alone things like pornography and masturbation. So how is a script like this received by professors at a reputable film school like NYU? And are there risks for you to pursue any of these themes? Or is it a bonus? Is it like everybody's fascinated because it's so weird and there's the exoticism of this weird cult-like religion, Mormonism, and everybody wants to learn about that because it's new and different and hasn't been covered before?
I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging about grades or any of that, but I had a lot of scripts I took to my writing professor to the lead up to this movie. They all kind of addressed Mormonism. They were all treated equally as anyone else's scripts, and kind of the perspective they offer is one of a dramatic perspective. Is this story dramatic? Does this story have a character tension? Is it interesting? And so those scripts were all kind of reached with varying degrees, from like, this script's really bad, don't make this movie ever, to, oh, this is really interesting. I wrote a script about a missionary getting ready to go on their mission and being like really stressed out about it and not really believing in it, and kind of focused on like my experiences of getting the endowment and that kind of aspect of Mormonism. But nothing really felt right until I wrote this one about this worthiness interview, and it felt like kind of a marrying of my interest in comedy and my interest in the Mormon religion. And so I actually never had the script read by the faculty. My screenwriting professor, my directing professor did. So when they did the review, they have this thing where you bring in your film and the whole faculty watches it and then reviews it. And before they start the review, they ask, who is his writing professor, excuse me, who is their directing professor, and they have them kind of talk last because they are familiar, invested in your project. So they kind of get people with like the cold takes to first comment. So they showed the movie, and immediately my writing professor said, whoa, like I was his writing professor, but he never showed me this script. And, he really enjoyed the movie. He enjoyed the feel. I think, the key in filmmaking is just making human stories. And I think this is a very human story, albeit a dark comedy. And I never felt discouraged to not explore this thing. I don't think that's what they're interested in. I think their interest is just good movies. And that was always my desire, just to try to make the best movie I could.
So what were their comments after seeing it?
Oh, I mean, they really, like I said, I don't want to brag about grades. They were just very lovely and had great notes, things that could be improved, jokes that could be added, but they really enjoyed it. And I can't really pull anything off the top of my head at this time specifically. They said one said that the Spanish was hypnotic and they could listen to this Americanized Spanish all day. And I'm glad they enjoyed that part, because I similarly feel that.
Now, was this review at NYU before you had submitted it to Sundance or after?
Yeah, it was before. It was
okay.
during the edit. So I had a lot of encouragement, and then luckily, I had this film during COVID. So we all went remote shortly after I got those first rounds of notes, and then I had this thing to chew on and work on. And I eventually brought another editor in, Jordan Michael Blake, who I've mentioned before, who grew up Mormon, and we finished editing the movie together in Los Angeles. I had after quarantining some time out in the West this summer. So, and the crew at large, so many of them were Mormon. There was, of course, a large portion of students that were from NYU that worked on the film as the crew, and they were all very confused. I mean, definitely my colleagues and cohort were way more confused than my professors. When we were shooting the movie, none of them really got what was going on and didn't really understand what the heck this script was, if it was funny, if it was serious or not. But they all worked. They were great. I mean, they're my friends, and we made the movie together, and now they kind of get what I was going for. But, it's hard to communicate on the page sometimes. And yeah, a lot of the actors are ex-Mormon or current Mormons in the film. The lead, Sam Sylvester, is not. He's a baker from upstate New York, a friend of a friend that, I kind of saw my 18-year-old self in him, so I casted them.
Were any of the Mormon filmmakers worried about how this would be received in the Mormon community?
When making this movie, I honestly didn't really think much about how it would be received. I honestly just thought like, I have to do this thing for school, and I'm gonna try to not have high hopes and expectations, because I've had a lot of, it's hard to be a filmmaker. It's a long road, and it's one I'm still on, and takes dedication. And I think the best way to approach work is kind of with low expectations. So, of course, getting into Sundance was a thrill, because then I knew, it's a film I wanted to have reach both active and inactive, varying degrees of belief, just the Mormon at large community. So, because I think this film does kind of speak to issues of the Mormon faith and Mormon culture. And I'm just very stoked for it to be seen by people that are familiar or not familiar with the religion.
So this was your first submission to Sundance, or it was not? You mentioned a couple others that maybe you had been involved in.
Yeah, but none of them played Sundance. I mean, this is my first short, and it's my first short I've submitted to Sundance and got in. This is my directorial debut.
This is your directorial debut, and on your first submission as a director, you get accepted.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
That's super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in film, and I had made other shorts, but I, shelved them. I didn't feel super good about submitting them to festivals. Yeah.
So what was it like when you heard you had been accepted? What was that like?
It was incredible. It was very, very exciting. I mean, I was driving. I was in the passenger seat and got a phone call from a random Arizona number. I was living in West Texas at the time. I was living in Marfa, Texas. I had an artist residency there this fall, and I thought it was spam. And then for some off reason, I decided to listen to the voicemail, and the reception was pretty spotty. And they said that they were calling from the film festival. It was kind of like the film. Hey, I'm Adam from the film festival. And so I like listened closely, and I was like, I think they said Sundance. And I turned to my friend Benjamin, who was also the producer on the film, and I said, I think Sundance called me. And he's like, oh, we got to pull over right now and call him. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I'm nervous. And he was like, Greg, they don't call you because you've been rejected, And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So we pulled off to a nearby rest stop, and it was really sunny. So I hid behind a dumpster, squatted behind a dumpster because that was the only shade. And so while inhaling dumpster fumes, I called Adam back, who was a programmer at Sundance, and they gave me the good news, and I was just so stoked. I was so happy Ben was there, who produced it, so we immediately could celebrate together. And for any indie filmmaker, Sundance is the dream. So it's very cool to have a short there, and I'm excited to work on the next thing and get a feature made someday soon.
So that's been Benjamin Buxton, is that right?
Yes, Benjamin Buxton. Yeah.
Shout out to Benjamin.
Yeah.
How did you and Benjamin celebrate, or did you celebrate?
We did. We celebrated. Just
what are you able to share?
We hugged each other. No, we just hugged each other and jumped around and cheered. It was very fun. And then we celebrated for many nights, and spread the news to our little friend group in Marfa, and danced our hearts out. We're big, like good Mormons. We love a good dance ever since EFY. So we danced our hearts out.
What types of opportunities does being accepted into the Sundance Film Festival open up?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's just a big artist community. A lot of filmmakers have played Sundance, and it opens up kind of a new family of film, and it's also an accreditation simply that, tells people who are looking for new talent that they've been approved, more or less.
So does it kind of guarantee that you can get a feature? Like, does that mean you would go to a studio and say, hey, I got this, I got into Sundance, where's my feature? Like, do you get an agent? Do you get an agent at that point?
I'm currently looking for representation. I'm hoping to get some during the fest, and hoping that will open up new avenues to getting a feature made. But at the end of the day, it's just like those how to be a film director books I read as a kid. If you want to make movies, you just have to make movies. So agents, no agents, big money, no money. You just got to get a camera, find some friends, write a script that's relatable, and shoot. So that's what I intend to do without, it's what I would be doing if I got into Sundance or not. So you just have to keep on working and not be distracted.
And then, because I've been to Sundance, I know this, like normally everybody descends on Park City. There's Jack Black walking down the street. There's Renee Zellweger. Like, there are press junkets. There's, your film shows at different theaters, and you get to sit and listen to the audience and clap. And you have this chance of like speaking after the film, before and after the film, and bringing up some of the actors and doing Q&A, like, and all that stuff. How do they handle it in COVID? It's got to be a super bummer to have this incredible moment happen, and then it's freaking COVID. So is there anything still good about Sundance during COVID?
I mean, yeah, it is definitely, you can't lie. You can't frame it in any other way. It's a big bummer. Of course, I wrote a comedy. I'm dying to hear a theater full of people. I mean, that's half the fun of having your movie play a festival, is getting to hear a huge audience react to it. You don't get that very often, especially with YouTube, and you put up content there and you get comments, you get likes, but there's nothing can beat the rush of an auditorium of applause. So sure, there's that dopamine rush I'm missing, but Sundance has done their best and have made a lot of platforms. And one thing I'm very grateful for and very stoked that they've done is they've made the shorts widely available. You still have to pay for a pass, but if you go to I believe the website is tickets.festival.sundance.org, quite a long address. But if you type that in, scroll to the bottom and buy an Explorer Pass, which is $25, you have access to all of the shorts. Where in a traditional year, you would have to get your tickets way ahead of time, be in Utah. And if you lucked out and didn't do that, you could stand in line in the cold and try to get tickets to a show. And I went a lot as a BYU student, and, a lot of me going to Sundance trying to see movies was just freezing my butt off. So I'm very grateful that it can be seen right now. Sundance is started yesterday and it goes to February the 3rd. So the shorts are just on demand, just kind of like Netflix. You log in once you buy your pass and you can just watch it. We're in short program 4. So I'm very excited that, we're playing the fest, and that Mormons, not Mormons, people in general can go and see this movie. It's much, much more widely accessible.
So will they be doing like a showing with you, where you do the intro and you do Q&A afterwards? Will they be doing any of that stuff?
No, not with the shorts. With the shorts, they did record a Q&A. They pre-recorded it on Zoom. We did that like a month ago. So that plays at the end. So you watch the short blocks. There's about like 6 or 7 shorts in the block. Mine plays second to last. And then once the short block ends, there's a little Q&A we pre-recorded. But this, honestly, John, this is way better than that Q&A. So no need to stick around.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So is there a way for shorts to get distributed post-festival? Like, I know that when you're a feature film, your whole goal is to get bought up by Netflix or Amazon or whoever, and then to have one of the big platforms distribute you. I don't even know how a short might get distributed.
Yeah, I mean, some people buy shorts, some studios. It's rare, but every year or so one gets bought. I mean, I think as I mentioned before, YouTube, Vimeo, that's more or less where you'll find shorts, and they're a great platform for them to be seen, but they're very rarely bought. So, this movie will most likely be online shortly after the fest, or maybe we'll play a handful of festivals, but it kind of feels like this year's a COVID year. So I want to get this movie out and seen as much as I can. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, so if people want to watch the movie now, I just posted a link on Facebook Live. Again, it's festival.sundance.org. You can find it, but there's a link. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. That's how you can see it now. If you want to see it after, we'll find out. You can let us know. We can update the show notes. Is there anything else you want to say about this movie before I ask you some questions about your future? Anything else you want to say about the movie?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, I just wanted to make a Mormon sex comedy, and so I hope if people after watching this watches the show, I hope you laugh. I hope you enjoy it.
I have to admit, I didn't read the descriptions of this, and I didn't know it was a comedy. And so that doesn't mean that there weren't parts that were funny, but like I wasn't primed for comedy if that makes sense, when I watched it. So it was kind of it was dark for sure, and it was funny, but I wasn't primed for comedy. And so that was a different experience for me. I don't know if that makes sense at all to you.
Oh, no, it definitely does. And I mean, maybe I am being too generous with the words comedy. It's not like some Will Ferrell movie. I mean, it's definitely dramatic. You feel for the guy. But for me, I mean, maybe it's just the way I am. I just love awkward silences. I just think they're very funny. My life is very awkward. So, I just kind of try to laugh at it and make movies about that kind of the gaps and the creaks and the awkward stares.
One of our listeners, Lizzie, is asking if you've submitted this to any other festivals this year.
Yeah. I mean, I have submitted to some other film festivals. Sundance kind of kicks off the whole festival year since it's in January, so I'm still waiting to hear back, and hope to have an international premiere as well. So looking forward to that.
Cannes, you're going to be in Cannes. You're going to be at Toronto,
That's
right?
right. Definitely.
So really quickly, if you don't mind sharing, are you okay on time?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, a comment from one of our listeners just came in. Dan Boyle writes, "Hey, Greg, congratulations from one of your dad's cousins. The name Elder Hyde in your film confirmed we must be related. Way to go. Nice to see you on Mormon Stories." That's from
Thanks,
Dan
Dan.
Boyle.
Thanks, Dan. And I will admit, yes, the Hyde is a shared ancestor, and all the missionaries in the movie, even the mission president. I went, to ancestry.org, and I pulled all the Mormon names from my family tree as a little Easter egg to myself in the
Nice.
movie. Yeah.
Okay. So just because I'm curious and I love film, what are kind of some of your favorite movies of all time, some of your favorite directors of all time, kind of the ones that inspire you now?
Well, back to Dean Duncan, he showed us this movie called Shadows in Paradise by Aki Kaurismäki. He is a Finnish director, and I mean, it totally blew my mind. It had like a very strong Wes Anderson vibe, but it was like 20 years before Wes Anderson. So I was like, what's this Wes Anderson guy ripping off of a key? And so it really just kind of opened my eyes up to how dry a comedy could be. And I love that film and all his films. He did a one recently, well, not so recently, about 10 years back. I guess I gander now, called Les Havre, like the city in France. So I really love that director. There's another film director named Roy Anderson, and he makes great films. He made one. The title's quite long. I might get it wrong, but it's called "A Pigeon Sits on a Tree Branch and Contemplates Existence." And they're both, I think, hilarious filmmakers, but their comedy is a little quirky and a little awkward, and I love their movies.
Any other favorite movies?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I could go on for days. I mean, I'm planning on watching the Oxbow Incident tonight, the Western, starring Henry Fonda. That's a great film. I love Westerns. My brother, when I was a little kid, took me to see The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He was 12 years older than me, and so it was kind of like a nice brother time. And just watching Clint Eastwood on the big screen was hugely formative. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. What are your next projects, if you're able to share? Or do you want to do, I mean, first of all, I have to ask, have you heard of Richard Dutcher? Have you ever seen States of Grace? Have you ever seen Brigham City? Have you ever seen God's Army? Any of those Richard Dutcher movies?
Yeah, I'm really behind on my Richard Dutcher. I have not seen States of Grace or Brigham City or God's Army 2, but myself, like any Mormon, that summer saw God's Army. We were out in Utah for a family reunion, so I saw it with my cousins in a packed theater in Sandy, and certainly memorable to see a missionary movie in a big theater. As a kid, that didn't think that would ever happen, or knew it could happen. So that was really cool on just like a very simple representational level of wow, here we are seen. That was really cool. And but I hope to I hope my first feature film, we'll see what kind of shape it takes. I imagine it will be another kind of Mormon comedy, just because that's a very a great place to start. But I hope to branch out, and I can't imagine ever leaving the realm of comedy, though.
Is there any project that you are able to tell us about that's in development, like kind of a dream Mormon themed feature comedy film that you want to make? Do you have scripts? Do you have concepts?
Yeah.
And are you able to talk about them, or is that not a taboo?
Yeah, no, it's not taboo, but I'll still kind of vaguely dance around them because they're all just kind of seem like pretty working on them, and want to just kind of keep them to myself for as long as I can until they're ready to be shown off. But I would love to develop this short into kind of like a broader feature that is an ensemble piece of missionaries and kind of similar awkwardly moments of, these young kids trying to find themselves as they come to age across the globe. So Elder Hyde, the short would be a segment, and then we'd, go to another part of the world and investigate another struggle of a missionary, and, we'd see them before they leave on their mission, and the movie would end with a montage, a great montage of their homecoming talk. So, that's like a quirky idea, and working on some others about a, young Mormon marriage as well.
I love it. My dear friend Cecile, I'm a huge Cecile fan. She says, I can't seem to buy a ticket or find the film from the link. Has it sold out? I'd love to see it. I don't want to stall the interview, but Cecile, I think you have to buy an Explorer Pass, and that will give you access to the short. Is that right?
That is right.
Gregory? So
Yeah.
Cecile, try getting an Explorer Pass, and that should give you access to the film, Cecile.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Cecile, and thanks for asking a question, because I'm sure other people have that too.
Yeah, I just sent you a link, John, in the chat, if that helps. So that will take you right there. And the Explorer Pass is $25, and I can send you and it's a short program. Thanks.
I'll paste that in now. All right. So I guess I just want to say that as someone who loves Mormons and loves Mormonism and loves Mormon culture and loves Mormon cinema, I'm just dying, and someone who I love Jewish, literature of Jewish culture. And, I've seen The Chosen and, Jewish film. Like, we've all been waiting for the day that, in Broadway, the Book of Mormon has been great. We've all been waiting for the day that kind of Mormon culture really starts to penetrate mainstream Hollywood cinema. And we all hope that Richard Dutcher would be able to pull that off, and he was not able to sustain it. And frankly, I think one of his biggest problems, we've had him on MormonStories, one of the biggest problems was fundraising. And part of that was just finding people to fund it. Larry Miller will fund a faith promoting, he's passed away, but like during the day, Larry Miller would have funded, a faith promoting Mormon, themed movie. But as soon as it covered controversial topics, well, the faithful Mormon money drives up. And is there enough ex-Mormon money to fund a non-faithful Mormon-themed movie, or just a raw, candid one? So that's all interesting. And I do have to say that my dear friend Tyler Meesom, along with Jared Hess, they're releasing a documentary on Mark Hoffman in March on Netflix, which is going to be a really good series. But we're just all waiting for someone to crack the nut in Hollywood of kind of a mainstream Mormon themed movie. So if I hope that's you, Gregory, and if it's not you, I hope it's somebody in the earshot of my audience or somebody else. But maybe you're our shot, Gregory Barnes.
I hope so.
If people want to support your career, is there any way they can do it?
Oh, well, that's nice to say. You can just reach out. My email's on my website.
What's your website?
I'm just gregorybarnes.com.
How'd you get that?
I unfortunately, some dope had it and had to sell it to me for a bunch of money. So, that's just how it goes sometimes.
So you did have to pay some money for that.
I had to, for this big website, big website money.
I love it. Okay. So they can reach out to you there.
Yeah.
You've got a little contact page. Oh, it's GregoryWBarnes@gmail.com. That's the email.
That's the email.
And they can even donate. It looks like. Oh,
if you want to support my coffee habit, you can, donate it for a cup of coffee if you want. There's me with my cat.
I love it. I love it. So excellent. All right. Well, anything else, Gregory Barnes you want to say before we bid you adieu? It's so congratulations. I'm super happy. Anything you want to say about your producers, or, just credit of anyone else who was involved in this film?
For sure. I mean, shout out to everyone involved. There were specifically those that were raised Mormon or current Mormons that helped me, make the movie. Like I said in that little filmmaker intro, it was definitely a labor of love, and we've been making movies together for a really long time. So, shout out to Joni Thompson, who's my producer for NYU. Born and raised in Pennsylvania, Bryn Mawr, not Mormon, but really showed up. And also to Tyler Walker, raised Mormon Catholic, but knows all about guilt. Big shout out to Benjamin Buxton, day one friend from Brigham Young University, go Cougs, and also Jordan Michael Blake, who's the editor and helped produce the movie, another Cougar friend, and Fidel Ruiz Healy, who grew up with a friend from NYU and was the cinematographer, and who bared with me as I showed him so many Mormon movies that I grew up watching, so he could help me nail the look of Godly Sorrow and so many others.
I love it. A couple questions from our audience. Janine Luke writes, did you like the Book of Mormon musical? Have you seen it, I guess? And then did you like it?
I'm superstitious and I stay away from Mormon media, so I haven't listened to it or I don't really
superstitious. What do you mean by that?
I just don't want to be influenced. They're doing.
I get that.
They're doing their Mormon thing. I'll do my Mormon thing over here.
I get that. Okay. Janine also wants to know, how are things with your family? Are they embarrassed? Are they happy? Is your dad, still a bishop? Is he now the stake president? You said he's a patriarch.
He's a patriarch, yeah.
Yeah. So, is your family feeling like you've brought shame upon their name? Are they feeling honored and excited for you?
Oh yeah, they're definitely stoked. Happy for their kid to finally be get some more recognition or whatever, be at this point in my career, have the career opportunities, but I think they're definitely a little concerned about the content. One of my brothers thought it was really funny, so that was nice. Varying degrees of belief, I'm sure, in the family, but I definitely think it threw my parents for a loop.
Who's the director that did the 40-Year-Old Virgin and
oh yeah,
what is it? Bad? What's the movie?
I don't know which one specifically, but the name fails me.
Oh no, okay. Super Bad, right?
Super Bad, yeah.
Are those the type of ultimate movies you want to make, or not? It sounds like that's probably not a big influence for you.
No, not necessarily. No.
Okay.
Oh, Judd
Apatow. Yeah. Okay.
Great comedy.
That's not what you're going for.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
No.
All right. So, Akeem writes, has anyone ever done a Joseph Smith feature film which presents maybe a bit speculative, real Joseph Smith? Is that even something you're interested in tackling, kind of like Mormon church history?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't really have much interest. Well, that's not true. I'm very invested and interested in Mormon stories. I would love to make one feature, but I don't intend to make a whole career out of only Mormon movies. There's a lot of aspects of life I would like to explore. But yes, no, nobody has done an adaptation of Joseph Smith's life, and that is something I certainly hope to write as well, because at least throw my hat in the ring of attempting, because it's a great American story and one that has not been depicted yet.
Would you want to do it as a comedy?
No, I don't. The tone would have to be just kind of ironed out, but I can't imagine it. I think it'd be kind of more historical fiction. I love period pieces. That's another thing. We grew up in our family watching Pride and Prejudice and, all those Sense and Sensibility. And so I'm a sucker for that as well.
Okay. And do you have the dream film you want to make? Are you able to talk about that, or?
I mean, I think that would be it. I think if I, did the Joseph Smith miniseries, that would be a dream come true.
Oh, a mini series, not just a single.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can't contain that man in one. I mean, I think you could contain him in 4 hours, but I would approach it like a film. I don't know if people could really sit through 4 hours of Joseph Smith, but I would. So that's how, kind of like a mini series vibe.
For sure, Joseph Smith will, just like David Koresh with, with Waco, like, yeah, Joseph Smith will command a mini series for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, I have one favor, Gregory Barnes, and all your filmmaking buddies. Can you not forget me and Mormon Stories when you make the big time?
Definitely not.
When you make your feature film, will you come back and not just go, oh well, it's just John DeLynn, it's that little podcast?
Oh, absolutely not.
I don't have time for you because now I'm like big time at the Oscars and all that Academy Award. You'll remember us little people.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, you'll be my date. We can go to the Oscars together. You'll be my +1.
I love it. Yes. I'm holding you to it. I've got that on film and audio. Yeah. All right, Gregory, anything else you want to share before we say goodbye?
No, thanks so much. So happy to talk about all this.
And you're going to be on like Radio West, and I'm sure you're going to have other press interviews, right?
Yeah, we had a feature in the Salt Lake Tribune that was run yesterday, I think just online, and I'm in the works. Will probably be on Radio West this upcoming week. That's being kind of worked out right now, and the Sundance did a very cute thing where they had Sundance alums introduce the filmmakers on Instagram. So David Cross from Arrested Development and Mr. Show gave our film a shout out yesterday on Instagram. It was quite lovely. So I'm very, very excited for the traction the film's been getting and for this opportunity to, the whole point, I think, of telling Mormon stories, not the whole point, but a fun aspect is connecting and the community and discussing about it. So super appreciate these interviews. I think they're the most important.
And there's a short winner? So, I mean, are you in competition to win a category?
All the shorts are in competition at Sundance. That's not necessarily the case with features, but all the shorts are in the short film competition. They have a grand jury prize. They have a director's prize. They have an actor's prize. They have an international short prize, which this doesn't qualify for. So yeah, the award ceremony, I believe, is on the 2nd. The night of the 2nd. So, we'll see. But I already, I'm just so stoked to be playing Sundance. It feels like a big win.
Can we do anything to lobby or spam or brigade the results?
I think they have all the judges, in a radio silence room with no reception. So I think it's just up to the judges.
Well, we hope you win, Gregory Barnes.
Thank you.
And good luck. Good luck with the press. I'll share a final comment from a listener viewer. Amy writes, "Good luck in your career. I look forward to seeing more work from you." And I'll just echo what Amy says. Gregory Barnes and all your colleagues and participants, we're excited for what you have done, what you're doing, and what you will do. Please stay in touch. Good luck. Represent us proud, and keep up the great work.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, Gregory Barnes. The movie is The Touch of the Master's Hand. It is right now premiering at the Sundance Film Festival. I'll show one more time a quick visual of it. There it is, The Touch of the Master's Hand. If you purchase the Explorer Pass, you can view it right now at Sundance at festival.sundance.org. Again, it's directed by our own Gregory Barnes. And thanks so much for joining us today on Mormon Stories. And if you like today's program, if you want to support what we do, again, you can always go to mormonstories.org and contribute. But also, more importantly, go to gregorybarnes.com. And you can donate to support his burgeoning film career. And if you want to get in contact him as a donor or a supporter, you can email him at Gregory W. Barnes with the E-E-S, B-A-R-N-E-S @gmail.com and reach out to him. So thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks again, Gregory and your buddies. Take care, and we'll see you guys all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Wait, I'll get that shot again. Okay, wave to everybody. Thanks, Gregory.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thanks, listeners. Thanks, viewers. You guys take care.